The Bible offers a rich and multifaceted perspective on war and peace, reflecting its origins in a time of tribal conflicts, territorial disputes, and evolving ideas of justice, morality, and divine purpose, making it an enduring and influential text in discussions surrounding the modern Middle East, where ancient scriptures intersect with contemporary political realities, shaping narratives, fueling tensions, and providing hope for reconciliation amidst some of the world's most intractable conflicts. The biblical view of war is grounded in both the practical and theological dimensions of life in the ancient Near East, with texts such as those in the Torah, particularly in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, detailing the rules of engagement, the justification for conflict, and the belief that God sometimes commands or sanctions war as part of his divine plan, as seen in the conquest narratives of the Israelites entering the land of Canaan under Joshua, where the promise made to Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land is fulfilled through violent means, raising profound ethical questions that continue to reverberate in theological debates and in the geopolitical struggles of the Middle East today. These narratives, often referred to as the harem or commands for total destruction, such as in Deuteronomy 7:1-2 and Joshua 6, reflect a view of war as a divine instrument for securing a holy purpose. Yet they also stand in tension with other biblical themes that emphasize justice, mercy, and the dignity of all human beings created in the image of God. Themes that later prophets like Isaiah, Micah, and Amos amplify as they call for peace, denounce oppression, and envision a world where war is abolished, as seen in Isaiah 2:4, where nations shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. A vision that has inspired countless movements advocating for nonviolence and reconciliation, even as the realities of political power and territorial conflict in the Middle East often seem far removed from this prophetic ideal. The New Testament, meanwhile, introduces a radical reimagining of the biblical approach to war and peace, particularly through the teachings of Jesus Christ, who in the Sermon on the Mount extols peacemakers as children of God, Matthew 5:9, and calls for nonviolent resistance to evil, as exemplified in his command to turn the other cheek, Matthew 5:39, a stark departure from the lex talionis, or eye for an eye justice of the Old Testament, and a challenge to the prevailing notions of power and retribution, a message that resonates deeply in the context of the Middle East, where cycles of violence between Israelis and Palestinians, sectarian conflicts across the region, and the enduring scars of colonialism and imperialism have perpetuated divisions and suffering. The apostolic writings, particularly those of Paul, further expand on this ethos of peace, with passages such as Romans 12:18-21, urging believers to live peaceably with all, overcome evil with good, and leave vengeance to God, framing peace as both a spiritual mandate and a practical goal that transcends human divisions, an ideal that stands in stark contrast to the realities of ongoing wars, military occupations, and acts of terror that define much of the modern Middle East. Yet despite these calls for peace, the Bible also acknowledges the complexities and moral ambiguities of war, as seen in the writings of Ecclesiastes, which declares that there is a time for war and a time for peace, Ecclesiastes 3:8, a sentiment that echoes in the pragmatic considerations of nations and leaders grappling with existential threats and the challenges of maintaining security in a volatile region, particularly in Israel, where biblical narratives are often invoked to frame the state's right to exist and defend itself against external and internal adversaries, while Palestinian communities, many of whom are also shaped by biblical traditions, draw on Scripture to articulate their own struggles for justice, self-determination, and peace in the face of displacement, occupation, and systemic inequities. The biblical emphasis on justice, as articulated by prophets like Amos, who famously declares, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream," Amos 5:24, serves as a moral touchstone for addressing these conflicts, calling for a reconciliation that is not merely the absence of violence, but the presence of equity, dignity, and mutual recognition. A vision that challenges all parties to rise above the zero-sum mentality that has often characterized the discourse on the Middle East, and to seek solutions that honor the shared humanity and divine image of all involved. The role of religion in the Israel-Palestine conflict and broader Middle Eastern struggles is particularly significant, as the land is sacred not only to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, but also to various sects and communities whose historical and spiritual connections to the region are deeply intertwined with their identities and claims, creating a mosaic of narratives that often compete, but also hold the potential for profound interfaith dialogue and collaboration, especially when approached through the lens of biblical principles that emphasize the common good, the pursuit of peace, and the stewardship of creation. This potential is exemplified in Abraham, the shared patriarch of the Abrahamic faiths, whose story, while often cited to justify exclusive claims to the land, also offers a powerful model of faith, humility, and reconciliation, as seen in his willingness to negotiate with God on behalf of Sodom, his resolution of disputes with Lot, and his unwavering trust in God's promises, qualities that invite believers across traditions to seek common ground and work toward a vision of peace that transcends sectarian and national boundaries. However, achieving such peace requires not only theological reflection, but also political courage, as the region's conflicts are deeply rooted in historical grievances, colonial legacies, and socioeconomic disparities that cannot be resolved by Scripture alone. Yet the Bible's emphasis on justice, mercy, and love provides a framework for addressing these challenges in ways that honor the dignity and rights of all people, suggesting that true peace in the Middle East will come not through domination or retaliation, but through a shared commitment to reconciliation, forgiveness, and the pursuit of the common good. A vision that aligns with the prophetic call to seek peace and pursue it, Psalm 34:14, and the teachings of Jesus, who reminds his followers that those who take the sword will perish by the sword, Matthew 26:52, a stark warning that violence begets only more violence, and that the path to lasting peace lies in the hard but necessary work of dialogue, compromise, and mutual respect. Ultimately, the biblical perspective on war and peace in the Middle East is one of profound tension and hope, reflecting both the realities of human conflict and the divine call to transcend those conflicts through justice, compassion, and faith, offering a vision of a future where the swords of war are transformed into the tools of peace, and where the people of the Middle East, drawn together by their shared history and spiritual heritage, can build a just and lasting peace that fulfills the biblical promise of flourishing for all nations.